On the one hand, Reinhardt was really nice, you know? I mean, like, anytime he had a problem, all you had to do was cook a nice big meal, and Reinhardt would come over and he'd listen to you. Of course, the problem is, when he was eating things he didn't like, you know, like peas, and I wasn't looking, or he didn't think I was looking, he'd spit them out at the kids, you know, like that. Spit them out at the kids. But when I wasn't looking, he didn't do that. And he'd just make me think the kids were being rotten, you know. Sometimes when he liked when he was eating, he wouldn't spit at the kids. He'd give them the finger when I wasn't looking. He'd stick his tongue out, you know, and do like that. But Reinhardt was always good for listening to your problems. All you had to do was cook a meal.
I met Bill when he worked at Slabtown last year. Seemed like a really nice guy. We shared some good times together until I took him home one night and showed him my train set. Then it wasn't long before that's all he wanted from me, was to play with my trains. Now, whenever I see him, that's all he talks about. I hate him for the way he used me.
There was this one time about 3 years ago when I was madly in love with Bill. And I'd just gone out to do my opening sequence of the play that we were doing. And he said to me, right before I was leaving, "Gee, I never did like that part of the play, Cheryl." And I became really nervous. So nervous, in fact, that I screwed up my whole speech.
Why he makes films, I'll never be able to figure out, because I saw that prize-winning job of his done at the Northwest Film Study Center, and it'd take a real demented mind to think of something like that to start with, and then the technique was just rotten. Perhaps in a few years, if he polishes up his technique and cleans up his mind, he might be able to make something of himself.
Sometimes Reinhardt was kind of funny. You know, I mean, like, right when you had to go to the bathroom, he'd stop you and ask an important question. You know, like, what do you think's happening with the Carter administration? But the whole time he'd been talking about this serious subject, he'd be standing there, you know, with his hand on your rear.
I think Bill's wonderful. Oh, when he rubs his hands all over me, it just, oh, I drop the dishes. Oh.
Bill was interested in films. You could say that about him. That was very prominent. He went through periods of sort of being twisted mentally. He could be really touching at times, and then at other times bitingly critical.
You know, I don't know why he doesn't seem to recognize quality. Obviously, he doesn't in his films. He never did. He does weird kind of animations with shaving cream cans and things, and you know, he's kind of a walking animation himself, a cartoon character. You know, you ever seen a real live walking cartoon? Well, Bill Reinhardt. That's Bill. You know, I'd say, not a bad guy, harmless, but you know, sort of like an olive oil type figure. He's you know, kind of looks like olive oil, walks like olive oil, slips around and slides like olive oil. You know, he's a very lubricated sort of guy.
Basically, I think he wants some sort of recognition, but he's going about it in a very unrational, infantile way. You know, he's making art films. He's not looking to really produce anything of any value. He just wants to indulge his egomaniacal imagination with this fantasy that somehow he'll be another Roman Polanski surrounded by women and swimming pools and
never.
I don't think it's going to happen, to tell you the truth.
Neither do I.
I think what's more likely is that he'll...
I think personally he should wash dishes at Sambo's. I think that would be his duty, don't you think?
I suppose the thing that just used to really grind me about Bill, you know, just really get on my nerves, he never listened to you. No matter what you had to say, he never listened to you. I don't know, there was some sort of a paranoia in Bill. Something to do with his manhood and his ego again. But he could really shut a person down to where you could almost feel really unimportant, as if it didn't matter whether you were there or whether you weren't. And in our situation, that's a kind of a bad way to feel. I mean, when you're living with someone, you like to know your presence is at least known in the same house. You'd expect that, wouldn't you?
He really got into cameras and lights, and I don't know, I never saw him bring anybody home. During that entire period, never since then, he's been completely celibate. All sorts of interpretations. You could say it's a Freudian interpretation. I mean, he would take the camera, you know, to bed with him, and you know, maybe the camera is his mother, and it's like la mer, the ocean that reflects all realities. So, everything I can say is, naturally, all of Bill's ex-girlfriends are, all of a sudden, we're really lonely, you know, and a situation like that, you know, it's hard to find a young man with a New York accent who could possibly take Bill's place. But
when Bill and I lived together, he used to spend more time messing with films and watching television than, oh, I don't know, anything I did combined. He couldn't break that intense interest he had in visual media. You know what I found myself doing? We had a little parakeet. I saved all the feathers whenever it molted and glued them on myself. I used to jump out in the middle of the living room with these feathers just glued all over my body, and he wouldn't even notice me. Now, if that isn't visual media, I don't know what is. And you can imagine how many insecurities that would breed. Well, I finally discovered that I had to leave that sort of an environment. It just wasn't healthy. So the day came when I did.
About the only thing I can say about Bill is that he's not your everyday person. He's himself, strange though he is. He's himself.
Well, I guess you can say that Bill's films have a certain photographic quality, but they lack substance. I like a film that moves me or changes a point of view. His films are silly and oftentimes very sexist.
I dare him to come back here. Just trade places with me for one day. I'd like to see him work with this as his artistic material, and give me that camera.
I'm fascinated by the fact that Bill keeps making movies through thick and thin, through richness, through poverty, through ill health and good. It's the most extensive diary I know of.
One thing he was always good for saying was, "Wanna fuck?"
Bill Reinhardt is officially listed in the Guinness Book of World Records as having the smallest penis in the world.
Everything he does turns me on. I like him so much. Really.
But Bill Reinhardt was really an egotistical son of a bitch.
Hey, you know, Bill's just so neat. I'm such a wild and crazy guy, and I just have one thing to say about Mr. Bill Reinhardt, and that is that 6 inches really is that long.
I'd like to see him castrated. I would like to do it myself. I'd like to castrate him myself. I would like to enjoy the pleasure of getting rid of his power for him.
Bill Reinhardt is a likable guy, but as a filmmaker, I have my doubts.
I guess that's really all I have to say about Reinhardt.
That's it. Cut it.
Cut it.
Cut.
Cut. Cut. Cut. Cut. Cut.